a little bit. There we go. Good afternoon, morning. Morning. My name is Jeff Jarecki. I am going to be speaking on the Ashley Madison breach. I had considered not giving this talk for a various number of reasons, which we'll get into here shortly. The number one is that we're still getting a lot of details. Things are still happening, numbers are rolling, things are changing. And I hate giving a talk on something that isn't complete. But so far, I think there's plenty to talk about. Now, I'll start off a little bit about me. I started off in IT, went into programming, went into security. Security's my home. DerbyCon accepted me, so I'm that's my people. I've got a stack of certifications. Those are fun. You learn a lot of buzzwords and technical things that you need to know to work in the field. Infosec has been a passion for me since I was a kid, and I imagine it probably is for a lot of you all. It's something that I do at home, whether I'm doing it at work or not, it's irrelevant. I've got 4 kids, and they keep that passion a challenge, so I don't really have time like I used to study up. So only certain things, the biggest things, get my attention. This Ashley Madison breach got my attention. This one really, at least for me, I saw the potential damage in a lot of different areas. And day one, when they released that data, I pulled it because I wanted to start researching it and understand it. Let me keep moving. Right now, I'm an IT assurance manager for MCM. I work on the security side of audits, helping out, making sure that companies are as set up as they can be and as safe as possible. I'm a hacker at heart, but I'm a business for the bills, so I think a lot of you probably understand that. Quick disclaimer, some of this is going to be controversial. There is some humor in here. There is also some very serious topics. As I'm sure most of you know, most breaches we count accounts, credit cards, email addresses. This one has a body count associated. There are people that are dead because of this breach. And so certain aspects of this talk is very serious, certain parts are funny. You can't help but laugh at some of it. But if you're easily offended, this may not be the talk for you. If I weren't sitting here, I would be listening to Adrian talking about his TSA keys because I think that is a very cool topic. But my apologies to anyone that I offend. Undoubtedly, I will get at least 1 or 2 of you. So, my certifications do require a strict adherence to code of ethics. So I have to be very careful with what I say with regards to the data that I've looked at. Yes, anyone can go and grab it, but it doesn't make it okay for me to talk about people in particular. The news media has had a lot of fun with this. As most of you have seen, they're finding certain key players to point out and to drag through the mud. I will not be doing that. One of my friends, when I announced that I was giving this talk today, and I'm giving it again at another conference in a couple of weeks, said, "Are you just going to get up there and start reading off names?" I said, no, I can't. And I know a lot of people have some strong viewpoints about the users of Ashley Madison and some of the other sites. I'm agnostic to that. For this talk, we're dealing with humans, okay? Regardless of their indiscretions or what you agree with or don't, it doesn't matter. Their data deserve to be protected just like anyone else's. So that's how we're going to deal with that. Also, I do like memes, so no PII will be released in this talk. I'm sorry. So whenever I write a talk, I'm usually talking about regulatory things and compliance. This one's a little different, obviously. And I always start with what's the goal, and then I build up the steps that I want to speak about to try and take you along the path that I've been on with this. And what I'm hoping to do is share just a little bit of the passion that I have around this specific breach in hopes that people will see it the way I saw it and maybe take some of that back to your employers. I know a lot of us in here fight. I have to fight the good fight almost every day at work and with clients, and explaining why security is so important. And so many times I've been told, nobody cares about our data. It's not that important. It adds up. And I think everyone in here understands that. I don't need to convince you. And a lot of us get exhausted with that tireless fight. But I think when you see what's happening with this breach and where it's heading, maybe that will remind some of us why we're in this field to begin with. Because that's kind of what it did for me. I know that sounds very dramatic, but it's true. So for me, to be honest, this has been fun. This is definitely drama to the umpteenth. Every day there's a new article about some statistic or who's in it or how many .mils or .govs or how many companies. The last one I saw, they took the big tech companies, you name them, Apple, Google. Well, actually Google wasn't on there, so I'm just saying, but Apple was. They were in the top 5, I believe, of email addresses of employees that were members of the site. And they ranked it in order. I think, I'm not going to mention who was number 1 because there's people from here that are there, but they ranked them in the number of users per company category. You can find that on your own. I'm not going to share that. But it's drama. Everybody's interested in this one. Because again, I've gotten multiple debit and credit cards in the mail. I don't even know what breaches they're from. I get them in the mail and it's like, hey, you've got to replace your old one with this one. I don't even know what breach got the first card. And so it's starting to be the alarm that's always going off for the public a little bit. And so it's starting to wear on, and people are caring a little bit less. This one got people's attention because now it's, I wonder if my neighbor did that. I wonder if my spouse or my friends or my boss, who I've been struggling to get a raise from, and now I have something over them. This got people's attention again, and that's why it's important. And the first bullet point here is a lot of my friends, there's a lot of people in here that I know, and they've looked at me and they're like, why do you not shut up about this breach? Because I talk about it all the time. I'm constantly getting details about it. And they're like, is there something you need to tell us? No, man. Go pull it up. Go look. I'm not on it. But if you're interested in it, it looks strange to some people because most people are being a little hush-hush about it other than the giggles around the water cooler. I will tell you, if you're interested in doing your own research on this, and maybe you're not familiar with the dark web, or you don't know where to get things, or you don't know how to build back up a MySQL database, hit me up on Twitter. I will help you, okay? I won't give you information, but I will help you on getting your own information. So there's been a significant amount of impact on different industries. A lot of people are saying, why was there 13, I think it was 13,000, I've got the stats later on in the slides, 13,000 .gov email addresses. Are they not monitoring this? Why are there people going to this kind of a site, regardless of whether it's unfair, but it's a dating site? Why are they doing this from their work email, right? Those where the verification emails get sent to. Every time they get a message, that's where they get an update that, hey, you have a new message waiting on ashleymadison.com at a .gov email address. So somebody's maybe not watching as well as they should. So let's talk about the parent company very quickly, Avid Life Media. They own 3 sites. All 3 were breached. It's shared networks. All the data has been gathered by a group called the Impact Team. Ashley Madison, as most of you know, is a site that caters to married people looking to have an affair. Now, it also caters to single people. There's multiple people. They actually have it broken out. You can see that when you sign up, you can say whether you're single or not. And all these statistics have been broken out as well. We'll move on here. Established men is for, well, probably what you think. Men that are doing quite well financially and are looking for a lady to share their wealth with, I guess. And Cougar Life, I'm pretty sure we all know what that is. There's TV shows about it. So, all of the data has been released about the first 2. The third one wasn't released. And there's a lot of theories as to why. I mean, you pick them. A lot of people think that divorce lawyers hired the hackers to do this because, you know, it's a windfall. But Cougar Life is the one they have not released the data for because it doesn't, I guess it doesn't offend the sensibilities of the hackers, so that chose to do it. I want to real quickly go over what was released and when it was released to give you just a small timeline of how all this played out. So the first notification that we knew something was amiss was on July 19th. Basically, they put up a warning. I'm sure a lot of us have seen that warning screen. It was plastered over Krebs and any other security site that was talking about it. They released a 40 meg dump that had some internal documents, some credit card details, just proving that we have your information. And they threatened that Ashley Madison needed to shut down immediately. Well, as you know, they didn't. And sure enough, if you look, July 19th, August 18th, basically 30 days later, they released a 10 gig, roughly 10 gig file. I think it expanded to, I want to say 19 gigs when it was all said and done, that had all of the gory details. Now, site didn't shut down. They dropped the data. There's a ton of PII and, in fact, TMI, because this also came with everybody's profile and what they're into and what they're not into, and very embarrassing stuff if your name's on that list. And by the way, if there's anybody in here that's been affected by this, we can all close our eyes and you can get out real quick if you want before I go any further. Nobody will judge you. It's fine. It only took a day. And I knew this was going to happen. I think everybody did. People were waiting for this data file. They had sites set up and just waiting to launch the second it hit. A day later, it went from the dark web to fully functional, searchable databases on the open web, where anybody could get to it. And all the attorneys rounded up at Ashley Madison and started firing off DMCA notices. Now, if you read up on the DMCA, it's out of the scope of this, they weren't really entitled to claim a takedown or copyright. There's a lot of, depends on who you talk to, but they did, and a lot of sites complied. Now, there was a couple of sites that did it what I consider intelligently, almost a responsible disclosure. They would require you to sign up with your email address. Then you could search your name. And if your name was on there and it matched your confirmed email address, they would let you know. That way you couldn't just go search on anyone. You had to own the address that was in the database to see that it was in the database. To the best of my knowledge, that site is still up because they aren't actually releasing data that does not belong to the individual. And of course, Twitter exploded. I'm sure people in here had to have seen it. There was like an Ashley Madison, Kentucky. Well, there was multiple states, but of course I saw the Kentucky one first. It was just firing off automatically everyone that was in Kentucky by name and email address, their information that they had been on that site. It was shut down pretty quickly, as you can imagine, but it's kind of like a hydra. You know, you knock down one, here comes another. And I would go on to the next part here. The next day, they dropped the third dump, which was 20 gigs. I think it expanded to over 30, if I remember correctly. You name it, it's in there. The hackers that were in their organization had been in there for years. They had collected, amassed personal email accounts of the executives, obviously the corporate email accounts. I mean, we're talking full PSTs of everyone involved. And according to them, they only released the ones for the people that were, you know, at the top of the chain. You're not going to find some little processor's email in there, which, you know, I guess that's good. They released a lot of information. This one in particular contained some documents and emails that were sent around regarding their own internal risk assessment. And as you can imagine, their risk assessment, they were very focused on, even though this is not a new company, it was still kind of a startup. You know, in April, so like 3 months before this first breach notification, they had attempted an IPO. It failed. Here in the U.S., things weren't looking too good for a site like this. And if you have to remember, this is from Canada, right? They started in Toronto. It's a Toronto-based company. They were planning to launch a second IPO in London. They thought that they might be able to get that through. It's a little bit more liberal over there, I guess, according to them. It's their own wording. And obviously when this happened, there's not going to be an IPO. That's it. The day after this, attorneys in Toronto had filed over $500 million in claims as a collective claims lawsuit in Canada against them. So there was going to be no IPOs. This also had some more information that made them look even less savory, such as the new startup mobile app, What's Your Wife Worth? It's as bad as you think. If things weren't bad enough for them, this really slammed it home. They were running quite the PR campaign. Hey, we know you don't agree with us, but it's still illegal. When that got released, there was almost no one in their corner anymore at that point, except for the feds when they announced a $500,000 Canadian, $350,000 US reward to capture the hackers responsible. Now, if you ask me, it's a little late. Probably should have done this within that 30-day time frame before they had released the data, but it was too late. And as most of you know, so far, nothing doing. If you read Krebs, I'm sure a lot of you do, he believes he has identified the individual that is in some way responsible for this breach. He loaded up a lot of evidence against one person. I don't personally think, if I had seen all of that, I would not have associated my name with accusing anyone of this breach with that amount of evidence. I would want a lot more. So, I don't know. But so far they haven't arrested the guy, so I'm assuming it's not him because this got the White House's attention, Congress's attention, obviously, for a myriad of reasons. A lot of focus is on this. And it's for some of the reasons that we're getting ready to talk about in the upcoming slides. So right after this, as some of you may have seen, the extortion begins, and there was a lot of it. It wasn't one person. You know, the people's email addresses were getting 10, 20, 30 of these threatening notices. Hey, I'm going to release all this information to your family member if you don't submit to me X amount of Bitcoins within this time frame. And I think most of them kind of realized, if I pay one, I've got to pay everyone that keeps coming back, so I guess it's time to fess up. And this is when we started reading the reports. You know, news media outlets were speaking with the large legal offices in their area and saying, hey, are you seeing an uptick in divorces? And they were. So that leads me to my next question. Are there any lawyers in here? I saw a hand, but we're going to act like I didn't see that hand. And now we can talk about them. So I'm just going to sum up for you the divorce lawyer's reaction to this. I think this is there. Anybody seen Goodfellas? You're familiar with this. They are swamped. Okay. Now, some of the more responsible ones are actually really advocating and trying to get these families into counseling, because there's something that occurs when we get this number of divorces beginning to occur all at once in the United States. I hate to give away some of my future slides here, but over 10 million of the accounts, legitimate 10 million, not the fluffed ones that we all know about, are from the United States. Based on the 2010 U.S. Census, there are 61 million married men in the United States. So if you do the quick math, it's 1 in 6 men that are married in the U.S. had an account. And now their wives, who have seen this in the news, can very easily go and look. Now, the wives don't have to worry as much because, as you've also all heard, there were 2,400 actual verifiable females in a site with over 20 million men. So it's really all in one direction on that. But law firms are spinning up quickly. They said this is actually usually a slow season for them. The reason is it's school starting. You don't want to disrupt the children with a divorce. So usually they don't see a lot of divorces right now. That's not the case. Divorces are spinning up fast. One of the features that Ashley Madison offered was something called a paid delete. So $19 and we will guarantee that we are removing you and everything about you from our site. Gone. Except for that credit card transaction with your name and address and the $19 charge. And they don't tell you that, but they kept those. And they actually kept the account as well. They just removed your name and put a bracket that said paid delete. But with the information they left, weight, hair color, eye color, interests, city, state, zip. You could probably identify some people based on this, but who needs to? You can just do a search through their credit card transactions for $19 and every one of them's there. They made almost $2 million on that and did not even protect their users. So not only are we not putting up security measures to keep this kind of a breach from occurring, we're not even delivering on the promises. So what can we really expect from them in terms of security, I guess would be the next question. So, let me skip over that. So I'm getting ready to come up to some statistics. I just want to give you a quick disclaimer. You can't factcheck.org this. I mean, go ahead and try if you want. It's not going to exist. I have the database. I've gone through it. I've crunched the numbers. I've come up with some of my own statistics. I've seen a lot on the web. I've tried to verify as many of those as I can. But undoubtedly, some of these will be wrong or off. And if they are, feel free to correct me if you like. But some of them are, you'll see. So, 36 million accounts. When you break it down, and there's been a lot of statistical analysis on how to determine whether an account was real. One of the most simple ones were looking where the account was set up from. They had the host IP address, right? If it had 127 dot anything, we're pretty sure it was done internally and set up in an automated fashion. Yes, millions of accounts were automatically set up by Ashley Madison employees. They actually had hired, this has come out recently, several individuals to work there and set up female profiles. From the numbers you can see up here, they were lacking desperately female profiles. They also set up the fembots. So, lack of a better term, these were automated scripts that were quite smart from what I've read up on, that would be able to hold a small conversation with you. Now, if you're not familiar with Ashley Madison, and I wasn't either before all this, so don't see what happens when you, when you, when you know anything about this site, you know too much. The way it worked is you would sign up, and I think you'd pay for a membership, but you would pay for packs of tokens that you could respond and make messages with. Now, if you read in the EULA, it actually specifically says that many of the profiles set up are for entertainment purposes only. It may not actually be monitored by a human. Yet those entertainment purpose only accounts would contact new members, which would in turn get the user to go buy a pack of tokens so he can respond back. Fraud? Maybe. But they did tell you. I'm sure we all read the EULA on everything that we do, so it's fine. We're fine. These fembots represented what appears to be about 99% of all communication that occurred from a female on the site. The way real female accounts were determined is kind of convoluted, but basically there was a ticker that would show the last time an account had logged in and sent a message. Out of the, I want to say it was 5.5 million female accounts, only about 2,400 had ever sent a message or checked to read a message. So you tell me, why did 5.5 million people sign up for something they never use? It looks fake. There's no guarantee. We don't know. In fact, right after the breach, if you didn't see, they came out when they were looking their worst and said, oh, we just got 90,000 new members last week. Business is better than ever. Except the CEO stepped down and now everything's falling apart and they're hiring teams and teams of lawyers. I don't know. They made $115 million last year. I don't know how long that's going to last them in legal fees. I can't even imagine the number of lawsuits coming in. So as you can see, I'm trying to leave some of these jokes out because there's some pretty funny slides I could have put up here about that number of men in a site and not the females. I'm not going to. You make your own. Here's what we talked about earlier. Approximately 1 in 6 married men in the United States were on the site through one various means or another. And remember, because we found so many fake accounts when looking through these, I'm hesitant to even believe the ones that look real. Not all of them. We know some were real, but we don't really have a grasp on what percentage. So we're grasping and guessing at best. I think most statistics that we've looked at are probably about 90% accurate, if I'm guessing. I mean, one of the things that I encountered when digging through this, and anyone in here that's worked in a security operations position before, who's ever had to investigate CP or anything of just vile nature that you don't want to deal with, I hadn't really looked at any of that in a long time. And as I was going through this database, you can't help but to notice some of the fields which had people's desires. And you get a very bad feeling when you're seeing someone's true inner thoughts, again, regardless of what you think of them, things that they were sharing on the belief of anonymity, right? I'm sure no one in here would do that. I really believe that. We all work in an industry where I think we would know better than to share anything of real value digitally. You don't do it unless you have to. But when you poured through these things, it was just a bad feeling. This was not fun research for me. It became unfun. A lot of this, some of you that know me know this story, but about a month and a half ago, I was camping and I got Lyme disease, all right? I got bit by a tick. It knocked me out hard, real hard. And so I was basically in bed for about 3 weeks, couldn't hardly move, couldn't hardly walk, just as sick as I've ever been in my life. And this is all I had to do, was to dig through these results. And this is what entertained me and kept me going mentally. But I already felt bad, and then I felt worse looking through this stuff. And I don't just mean because there was some depraved behavior on there, but some of these people had various reasons for being on that site, and it's a shame that the entire world now knows everything about them that no one would want to know. This stuff is searchable on the open web now. I mean, they've stopped sending out DMCA notices. Sites exist. Twitter handles exist. Most of the companies have given up on trying to block it. You can find it anywhere. Doesn't take much of a Google search. So, the potential financial impact, according to a number of sources that have looked at it based on what you can expect to get if you do a class action lawsuit, is about $4 billion. Average attorney revenue on that at 25%? $1 billion. Yes, believe me, they are out fishing and looking and contacting. If the extortion emails weren't enough, I guarantee you attorneys have set up automated emails. Let us help you. Let us sign you up for this class action. It's coming if it hasn't happened already. The unfortunate part of this breach is everyone's been pretty tight-lipped. We actually learned more from the hackers. Usually hackers are quiet. They may send out their message and say, oh, haha, we got you. The Impact team did an interview with a pretty well-known security blog. And we know that it was theirs because it was signed with the same private PGP key that was used to release the data. So we know it's accurate. We know it's legitimate. And we're going to talk on the next slide just briefly about some of the things that they announced. They were pretty verbose about it. I mean, they told how they got in to an extent, but we only have one side of the story. We can't really see the company's response because they've been pretty quiet about it. We don't know what systems they had set up, but based on what these hackers have, I can't imagine they had much set up in the way of security. So, the internal emails indicate that they knew there were problems. That internal risk assessment that they did pointed out, there was a lot of good notes from a lot of senior officials at that company where they were concerned about this type of malicious behavior or activity. But as with so many organizations, what happens? Production first, right? Drive, sell. Security will come later. We'll catch it, don't worry. We'll pick it up. Next quarter, we got it. Let me go over here. So, the password for all servers for root access, pass1234. Yeah. For me, look, I get it. We're hurrying. Startups, we're hurrying. We're burning through what we can to get done. You're not going to tell me they didn't have the 10 seconds to make a better password than that. I just won't believe it. The Impact team indicated there were no security measures to bypass. They said they spent a significant amount of time reconning digital footprints of ALM and were disappointed to break in and have no one realize they were there. There was nothing in place to alert anyone They spent years, again, this is all according to them, this is one side of the story. They spent years in the systems, reading, listening, learning, collecting, exfiltrating. Their credit card processor, as most of you have ever dealt with one understand, occasionally you have to go back and take a look at transactional details. So you may have usernames and passwords to log into that. Yeah, they were stored on the network, unprotected. So they were able to then log into their credit card processor and take a look at any transaction in detail that they wanted, which is where some of the data that got released came from. And the last question that was asked of them was, who are you going to target next? As if they're going to answer. They didn't answer any specifics, but they did say there are several in their crosshairs right now. Anyone that they deem to be, I forget the wording, but it was along the lines of evil, bad, doing bad things, taking advantage of their users. A lot of the wording that was used indicated that they weren't just as upset with the site and what its premise of existence was. They were also very upset that even as bad as the site may be to them, that they were lying to their users. They were not securing their data, this most critical and valuable of data. I mean, it doesn't get much more valuable. And they weren't doing anything to take care of it. And that is one of the reasons they indicated that they chose to do this release. You tell me. I don't know. I think they got a lot of attention from it. So why is this so serious? Why should we be so afraid of this kind of hack? Again, as we talked about before, the alarm that's always going off isn't an alarm. It's something that we put an Outlook rule in place for to go into a folder and we never see it. We right-click and do mark as read all, and then we don't look at it but maybe once a year. What I immediately became concerned with was an impact on local government. 10 million verified United States accounts. Now, we're grasping at straws here, but what number could end a divorce? 5%? 10? 50? I don't know. What I do know is that while that type of behavior may have inevitably led to divorce at some point anyway, with a release like this causing a near instant impact over a few months instead of over years, could really clog up a system and do actual infrastructural damage to local communities. New York was number one in the number of users in the United States for having had Ashley Madison accounts. And if anybody's ever had to go and, I don't know, file a summons or go to the courthouse for something, you know there is a long wait for anything. And I'm not talking about the line that you get into to fill out paperwork. If you do fill out the paperwork, you have months to wait before you actually get to go and do anything. I don't know how many of you in here have been through a divorce, and I'm not asking for a show of hands, but I can tell you from personal experience, it's hard. It will crush a person. Your career, you will not, whether you're initiating the divorce or you're being divorced, you will not be the same at work for weeks. It is a distraction of epic proportions. It will not stop invading your life for weeks. You'll be less effective at your employer. That business will suffer. The services you're able to provide, they're reduced. And there is a very real financial impact when it comes to a divorce. There's a reduction of speed of services for our local governments. As we talked about earlier, the courtrooms are already clogged. The children suffer, therefore their schoolwork suffers. The teachers have to pay more attention to them. These are all small little things that you're thinking about, but we have a body count. There are 3 documented, attributable to this breach suicides so far. Just that they left a note. There could be more, we don't know. That's serious. I don't remember seeing any kind of a suicide count for a PII breach for healthcare, for credit cards, banks, Home Depot, Target. Everybody got a new debit card, and they moved on with their day, and some people had to do credit repair. So next, organizations become questioned. As I mentioned earlier, if you've got so many .gov and .mils and at apple.com, I mention Apple because I'm an Apple fan. You can't tell by my Google phone in my pocket. Does one not begin to wonder, if you are letting your employees do this at work, what are you doing with our data? How safe is that? Celebrities nailed to the wall. Many have been drugged through the mud. You've seen it. If you haven't, Google it. Fun read. I'm not going to mention them here. It's not the right thing to do. Politicians have been drugged through the mud. There are a number of politicians that were on that list. We can't confirm them. Most of you probably heard Barack Obama, right? He had 10 different accounts, if you can imagine, right? At least 10. Clearly it's not him, one would hope. Especially if you look at some of the domains. There's some inside jokes about White House domains some of you may have heard, and people were using the wrong domain, let's just say that. We can't verify some of these. Some of them you can, based on the credit card details, right? Because we can see the credit card transaction. Yeah, they weren't verifying email addresses, but they have a unique identity ID, and that matches up to credit card transactions that have been posted against it. So all you've got to do is match your credit card up. If that name and address matches on the credit card, what the person is you're looking for, stands to reason you've got the right person. Careers have been severely impacted. Imagine going to work and all your coworkers know what you've been doing. Not only do they know what you've been doing, they know what you're into and what you've been doing it with. It takes a stronger person than me. I don't know how I would go back into work. I could not do it. And again, we don't know what these people are going through in their personal lives. Some of those people were marked as single on the site, but they're going to get harangued the exact same way. So, for the outcome, if you can just imagine for a moment all of these things happening within a 3, 6, 9-month time period, the effect that that can have on our community, on the people that we depend on, doctors, nurses, lawyers, some of them, your boss, your clients. It's big. It can really hurt. And it can cause real damage to the services that we expect from day to day. This, to me, would sound almost like an act of cyber terrorism. This data, in my opinion, is far more valuable than financial impact for a credit card breach, depending on the size, because it really hits the individual. So, for a moment, and I think, how am I doing on time? How am I doing on time? I don't want to run over. I see people lining up for lunch. Or I thought I was. Disregard all the feelings over this. How's it going to affect you? How's it going to affect your business? And if you think about these things for a moment and you find that this is serious, it's not just a simple PII breach. Take that spark back with you when you fight, as you do daily, as most of us do, to explain to people why we need budget, why we need tools, why we need resources to protect data. I've worked at several employers who would look at me and say, no one is after our data. And you know, honestly, in the moment, I couldn't find a reason why anyone would be after the data either. It didn't really have an impact. But what if that data correlated with another breach's data? Then it does have an impact. And oftentimes, I think we can forget how important the data that we protect is and how easy it is to get caught up in reports and documented process and policy and procedure and forget why it is that we do all of that. And it's to keep things like this from happening. To be fair, what can we think about in comparison to Ashley Madison? There's not, I hope, I don't know, there's not a lot of sites like that. I know, and I'm hesitant to mention it because one guy's getting sued already for having mentioned it, but in the emails, it does appear that their CTO had hacked a competitor. Again, it appears this way, no guarantees. I know that someone's being sued for having said this as though it were fact. He apparently hacked into nerve.com. I guess it's a competitor. I've never looked at it. I really don't know, but I believe it's a dating site. And he was able to modify account details, read this, read that. He could get everything. And he was emailing some of the top brass at the company about it and saying, hey, should I start doing this? Should I start doing that? There's no responses. We don't know what he did, if or nothing. We do know that he was planning. They were looking at acquiring that company and had realized that they had a security breach, and they were trying to determine, should I tell them? You don't see an answer when you dig through the emails as to whether or not they were notified of that. That said, remember why it is that we do what we do. That's my message for this, because there is still so much more data coming out right now, and we have not even really begun to see the beginning. The divorces are piling up. We do know that. We do know that there's been deaths, and we need to hope that this smooths out as quickly and easily as possible, and hope that we don't hit another one. But if I'm guarding any kind of personal data, and when I say personal, I'm not talking about first name, last name, zip code, address. I'm talking about personal data. We really need to safeguard that. That's it. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, define breached. They weren't breached. They were accessed legitimately with credentials that someone wasn't supposed to have. So the Ashley Madison folks had stored the credit card processor's username and password to log in and dig down into the details of a credit card transaction. We do know that they utilized those credentials. I believe they actually mentioned it in their interview, and there's data in the data dumps from that that you can do matching on. So, but it wasn't really a breach. Thankfully for that poor credit card processor, they haven't been drug into this. So, does anyone else have any other questions? All right. Well, it looks like lunch is ready, or almost ready. So, enjoy lunch. Thank you.